Hello and a very warm welcome to our very first episode of a brand new series that we're starting, and it's called Inside SA Media. I'm super excited about this one because we get to delve into all things SA Media in a nice format where we take every little subject matter and topic piece by piece over the next couple of weeks as we learn together. I'm super excited. This brand new series is of course brought to you by Tribox Media and Factfort, and my name is Hlaudi Motsoeneng. Let's get into it. So what happens when your national broadcaster stops working for the people and starts working for power? The South African Broadcasting Corporation, or SABC, is more than just a TV station or radio stations. It's a mirror to our history, it's a mirror to our politics, and it's also a mirror to the power struggles of this country. Now, as we all know, the media plays a very critical role in democracy. It keeps the public informed, it exposes wrongdoing, but also holds power to account. So what happens then when that power is compromised? From apartheid propaganda to democracy building, as we've seen it happen over the years, and then into the depths of political interference, the story of the SABC is big, it is complex, it is layered, but also incredibly interesting, and says a lot about what and who South Africa is as a country and all the stories that have played into that. And I'm very excited for us to delve into the first part of Inside SA Media, the story of the SABC. Let's rewind a little bit. So the SABC was born in 1936 under the Broadcasting Act, initially to unify the country through radio. But by the 1960s, it had become the apartheid government's most powerful propaganda tool. News bulletins ignored black communities, resistance movements were criminalized, the ANC, PAC, and other liberation movements were then labeled terrorists and never mentioned without condemnation. The SABC didn't inform people, it controlled them. The Internal Securities Act, Publications Act, and other laws ensured that any journalist stepping out of line could be arrested. So behind the scenes, journalists were being monitored. Some were collaborators, others resisted quietly, and often at great personal risk. Take, for example, Zwelakhe Sisulu, a black journalist who repeatedly was detained for reporting the truth about life under apartheid. Though not based at the SABC, his experience reflected the climate of state media, repression, surveillance, and intimidation of journalists who challenged the official narrative. Within the SABC itself, many journalists either conformed or were pushed out. One insider, a former editor during the 1980s, later testified before the Truth and Reconciliations Commission that journalists were regularly instructed to rewrite stories that cast the apartheid government in a negative light. News bulletins ignored township protests. They banned political organizations and sanitized state violence. The newsroom was no place for truth. Still, some brave individuals tried to inject integrity into a broken system. And this legacy of censorship and compliance didn't vanish in 1994. It simply evolved. Then came 1994. Democracy, a new mandate. So now the SABC was expected to become a true public broadcaster. So it was supposed to be inclusive, independent, and accountable. So there would be editorial independence, and this was basically a constitutional promise. Under the leadership of individuals like Zwelakhe Sisulu, the broadcaster began to transform. New shows emerged. We had Special Assignment, Cutting Edge, Yizo, programming that really tried to reflect an authentic image of South Africa. But change was not easy. The Broadcasting Act of 1999 restructured the SABC but kept government control over board appointments. Political expectations now replaced apartheid directives. Internal divisions started to emerge. Now you had editors that were clashing with political appointees. Journalists raised concerns about the creeping influence from the ruling party. Snooki Zikalala, appointed head of news, was accused of purging critical voices and shaping coverage to align with SABC narratives. It certainly seemed like the seeds of capture were being sown. Enter Hlaudi Motsoeneng. Once a low-level producer with no matric, he soon rose to acting CEO and eventually held immense power over editorial decisions.
Coming to the issue of, should I go back to school? The answer is big no. All these people who are sitting here, most of them, they have qualifications. But if you can take me head on, they know I mesmerize them. At editorial level, you sit and you ask them, can you come with a very good story? You know what will be a good story? Corruption. That is any journalist. When you talk about a good story, it's corruption for them. For us, it is important to portray the country in a positive way, because there are so many good stories that is happening, even now as we are speaking. But if you can check, especially print media, it's more negative stories. Where are positive stories? Have you ever seen positive stories leading the headlines? You can't see them.
Under his watch, the SABC became more like a personal fiefdom than a public broadcaster. In 2016, Hlaudi banned visuals of violent protests on air, claiming that these created a negative image of the country. He then implemented his very popular 90% local music quota overnight. At face value, of course, these policies seemed very patriotic, but what they did do is to bypass editorial checks and alienated much of SABC's other professional staff. It is, of course, important to mention that not all of the outcomes were negative. In fact, that 90% local music policy was welcomed by many in the arts sector. For the first time, South African musicians were prioritized in a meaningful way. Royalties rose, local genres from jazz to maskandi got daytime airplay. For once, South Africa's sound dominated its own airwaves.
We are able to pay our suppliers in time. We are able to pay royalties for the first time. Mzwake Mbulu, you know we are paying you now. And the actors.
I tell you, lots of people are standing by the SABC celebrating this great achievement of going into Africa, speaking to intra-Africa trade and watching our own narratives, our own stories spoken to and told by Africa.
2016 is just one of those great years. I think the whole creative industry, the whole arts and culture industry has to say, wow, with a big sigh.
That 90%, it is part of transformation. And we cannot go back to negotiate it.
Saying that is the youth of this country, we are the guardians of this 9010 that has been fought by our legends. We are saying that the journey that our legends and our comrade Mzwake and our Bradon started, we are going to safeguard it. We are not going to be apologetic to anyone.
Some saw it as a cultural reset. Artists spoke of a renewed pride. So the SABC even committed hundreds of millions towards local content production, fostering homegrown creativity and opportunity. But of course, the heavy-handedness couldn't be ignored, and journalists who questioned these moves were silenced. Now, there were 8 who were fired for speaking out against censorship. These journalists became known as the SABC 8. One of them, Sunta Venter, suffered harassment and intimidation. She later died of stress-induced cardiomyopathy, so the price of integrity had become fatal in her case. Court rulings eventually declared Hlaudi's actions as unconstitutional, but the damage had already been done, specifically in the newsrooms, because these newsrooms were now demoralized, the public trust had eroded, and of course political interference had become embedded and had formed part of the DNA of the broadcaster. Now, the years that followed exposed the scale of rot. In 2017, a parliamentary inquiry laid bare how board appointments were manipulated, editorial policy was undermined, and billions were mismanaged. The SABC had become a site of factional battles, a pawn in the broader state capture project, and of course civil society organizations like SOS Coalition and Right to Know campaigned tirelessly to try and bring about change. But the damage was deep. Financial bailouts followed. Layoffs gutted the institution. Internal reforms were slow and very painful. The SABC's own cadre deployment policy was exposed as part of the problem, with many appointments having little to do with merit and everything to do with loyalty. Even now, concerns linger. Board members appointed with political ties, inconsistent editorial standards, and a shrinking advertising revenue in the digital age. So, why should we care? Because over 30 million South Africans rely on SABC for news, for education, and entertainment. It reaches into rural areas, into schools and homes with no other media access. But when a public broadcaster loses its independence, democracy suffers. Without accountability, citizens can be misled or manipulated. The future lies in digital transformation, transparent funding, and a strong public oversight. Civil society must stay vigilant. Parliament must stop treating SABC boards as political prizes. We need a media that informs, questions, and includes. A media for the people. In your opinion, is the SABC truly free from political control? Or are we just waiting for the next chapter of capture to begin? Please do share your thoughts with us in the comment section below. We would love to engage with you on what you think about the story of the SABC and any other information that you feel you would like to share with us regarding today's episode. I look forward to sharing the next episode with you, so please do join me for our episode 2 of Inside SA Media.